let's have one of the very first one even before the tier list. Let's have you do a little more of an extended sort of talk on what you're liking to do and wanting to do and all that.
As far as like DDO, what I'm enjoying and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like what you've done in the past, stuff like that. And
Yeah, so like my DDO experience started like really fucking young. I was a kid, man. Started out on Fernia, good
OG
old
Fernia
OG
represented.
days, OG Fernia.
Yeah.
Playing with my dad, my cousins and their dad. One of the cousins is Hayden. We play with him quite a bit.
Yep.
Pretty fairly well known on Kyber now. But we all played together. We played in a little guild called Hella Weights back in the day. It was just like I started out as a rogue, man. Like that was not a great first character to play. Just looking back at it.
They wanted you in those Von 5 runs. Let me tell you what.
Oh, they did. I remember one of the best things I ever did because I used to talk on the voice chat as a kid, and I regret it looking back on it. But one of the guys was like, "Hey, you're the best kid I've ever run with," and I was like, "That's the best compliment I've ever heard," because I was just disabling the traps, and everyone loved me.
Yeah. Oh man, those traps back in the day.
But
It's absolutely crazy that we both started like when we were young on Fernia, playing with our dads just in our guilds doing our
I
own
almost
thing.
guarantee we played with each other too, because I used to hang out in the fucking Wayward Lobster all the time, and you said
Yeah.
that's where you. I swear that was like the kid
That's
hangout spot. Tons of kids hung out there just because like, oh my
100%.
god.
Yep,
It was fun, man. Like the Wayward Lobster, you're looking back on it, that is such a nostalgic thing. It's kind of dead now, but just hanging out in the Wayward Lobster, fucking blasting people
I'm not dead for
with
long.
Finger of Death, and
Stuff
I
actually
think it was the
happens.
Dwarf Clerics and
Oh,
Comet Falls.
I had a pink ass docent on my Warforged Sork that was death block whenever people started throwing fods around.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
all I knew how to do.
I get hit once, not puts it on. I'm another
Not
pink
today.
Warforged. Screw my elfcraft stuff.
Yeah, no, and then like I never really got like I just kind of did lives and shit on when I was on Galanda and stuff like that. I don't know, I wasn't like so I wasn't a super big player of the game. I just kind of played, but I just didn't know what I was doing. Then I met you in hardcore, right? And then
Yeah, just
that just
away
kind of
for a
like
bit and then came back.
I met I quit on and off a lot. And I met you in hardcore and just kind of we just ended up playing together a lot. And I met Snow and made friends with him and stuff. And he told me to come to Kyber, so then I came to Kyber and just kind of that's like where all my knowledge of the game grew. You know, got completion and stuff like that. And working on racial comp now with you, obviously.
Yep.
And I think that's actually kind of a good way to segue into I don't actually no that's later. But
I'm doing it in that order.
yeah, I mean it's like it's good to bring up that like we're gonna be you and I are both grinding racial comp now, and it's gonna come slightly before some of the other stuff we have planned, but like that's like our number one priority for sure.
Yep, that's gonna be a big focus. Couple lives a week, getting epics as well, getting those powerhouse divines and primals.
Yeah, and I can't wait to actually fully get to see the power of like a true build. I think within a couple months I'll have the main stuff that matters. I'll have racial comp, primals, and divines and comp.
Yep, and that'll all be really, really, really big. It's what's going to enable one of the things that we feel like is going to enable the sub 6 hour speed run of 1 through 20s, which is part of the inspiration behind the tier list, where we want to get to a super minuscule time, and a part of that is making sure we have everything as maxed as we can.
Getting wings at level 1 is partially in there. Like
yeah, Dragonborn's definitely going to be probably the class or the race to go because they get their memory of flight, and you can get 16 points, racial points, and take 16 to get memory, I believe.
Yeah, but before we go down that route, let's kind of tie back into the tier list and stuff like that, I believe, and just kind of what are like I posed the idea, and then like you kind of came up with some goals and other ideas, and like exactly why we made the tier list. So like, what was your main goals behind making it after I posed the idea?
Yeah, so it is behind what I saw when I first heard. Oh yeah, tier list stuff like that is just giving a good ranking and just something to put in stone at one point in time, and then you can always go back to it and refer back to it and change things and adapt and go, okay, this is where we think it is ideally, or where like a two-handed fight or two-weapon fighting build is, and sort of the mid tiers, average stuff. and then we play it and we realize, okay, it's actually slower, or it's faster, or this one's particularly is better, like Ranger or
Mhm.
something like that, and just sort of seeing where things go and how the meta of leveling evolves now that we're trying to like push it and really optimize out paths and stuff like that. All builds will probably go a little bit faster. It'll be things that you just prioritize, and thus those builds that can check those off. Really, like being able to fight in red DA for melees is huge. Being able to go really
Yeah,
fast and not
definitely.
be slowed down, survivability, really big.
Yeah, and then like I think for someone like you who streams a lot, it's just a good, like, even if they didn't see the video, it's a good tool whenever someone comes in asking about, is this class good at leveling, or is this class fast at leveling and stuff. You can just give them a direct guide as to, like, this class is mediocre, or this class is above average, or sorry to tell you, this class sucks.
Yeah, there's this one. Don't do the thrower in heroics. Just don't do it. Get yourself a box. Call it a good day.
Yeah, it gives a good avenue for people to get more involved because they see something like that, like, oh, that's cool, I could try this, and be like, okay, well, now this is supposed to be better, I'm gonna go try this, right? It gives people like a interesting ideas to try, I guess.
Yeah, put some things on the radar, and it can like you were talking about when you're just sort of playing the game early on, don't really have a ton of direction, things like that. It can give people direction of, okay, they want to do a life, or they want to get completionist, and now they can look through the tier list and be like, okay, two-handed fighting paladin, top of the paladin board, perfect. I was thinking
Yeah,
going
let's try
tank
that.
paladin. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do tanks.
Unless your goal
Or
is 30.
yeah, and completionist these days is pretty common. Right, the game's been out for what,
Yeah.
16 years at this point, and so, I mean that's a life a year. Uh, Granted, a handful of first few years weren't playing, but there's so much power in the game now that lives aren't really a big issue, and completionists are not super difficult to get. But racial comp is still a pretty big investment. 39 now a shifter races to get through, and especially when you don't have to worry about your class and just the race, and you can just zoom through things. You can now sort of see the top of that list and really eh, make steps towards that in a more focused manner, as opposed to just being like, I'll sort of go and get it a little bit. It's
Yeah.
daunting, but I've
That's
I
like
went
actually.
from I went from came
Go ahead.
come back to the game. I played for the first 4 years, stopped playing for 8, came back right when Charm was dropping, and didn't even have comp. I had a couple Warlock lives, a human, and a Dragonborn life. I think that's all that I had. And then the next handful of months, I just focused on getting my completionist, and then intermixed in between hardcore seasons because I'm a huge hardcore fan. Um, I was just working on going racials and going fast and trying to optimize that out, and that's when I found my enjoyment in the sorcerer.
Can have 2 points there. I'll chime in on, but like the first one is like, it is interesting to see how like racials have kind of changed stuff like that, right? It's people are more concerned with really finding the fastest class on the 20 because it does matter what just the straight fastest class is, because before it was just like what's fastest for this class because you needed that life rather than
You know, the specific class as opposed to the general.
yeah.
Yeah,
And the other thing was, I was in like the same situation. I came back and didn't have comp and learned all my endgame stuff from, Snow and you and stuff like that. And now I still don't have racial comp, but I think that I'm a fairly relevant player at the end game. It's interesting to come back and still be behind and like be able to do things, right? Like lives are important, but you can still be relevant in the end game without them.
yeah. Player skill is really important as well, and it shows. And DDO is, because of the time it was created in and how it's aged, it's not the most complicated game. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of depth. But if you understand that, then you can know where those boundaries lie for your character. I have first lives, whether it's from hardcore or there's low lives in other servers, stuff like that, where I'm can hedge a bunch of my benefit or my strengths and really focus in on one
Hmm.
thing and be able to follow through with that without raid gear, without an exorbitant amount of lives, stuff like that. And there's
I think it's
a lot doable on low lives.
Yeah, I think that's partially why I enjoy hardcore so much. I like the idea of everyone is on the same playing field, and mm, there's some elements that we'll talk about in different podcasts about hardcore, like buying 50 pots that make the leaderboards and stuff less relevant. But like being able to do reapers with people that you all know have like low lives and stuff like that, it's really interesting. Just point of view and stuff like that, rather than everyone has uber completionists or whatever, and you just kind of run through them, right?
Yeah, it adds a lot of that challenge back into the game. which is really it's nice. I enjoy it. I enjoy actually having to apply myself as opposed to just being like, throw myself at the mobs. If I die, I die. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it gives a different dynamic to the game where it's like if I'm doing R10s right now, I just fucking send it in there and throw some mass holds and throw my instants, and if something gets free and hits me, whatever, I died. I lost 10% experience. It's not the end
Yeah,
of the world.
yeah, all the DC casters stuff. With that though, you talked about running with a more of a consistent group on hardcore, and that's what we focused on for live now.
Oh yeah,
Being in about the same place, getting our lives for racial comp, and that's where the tier list is sort of created around. We're both in that same place, and thus are building it around that duo potential because it's pretty. I wouldn't say super easy, but you're much more likely to find someone else that you can link up with, and then it makes the
definitely.
entire experience so much more enjoyable for so many people.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something to note. Is maybe we didn't say it too well in the video. The tier list was made for duo point of views. Like some of the classes on there that we'll be talking about today are like actually incredibly good at on the duo list that we didn't expect, and we'll actually be moving up on the list when we talk about it later. But like in a solo situation, the class probably wouldn't have been as good.
Yeah, and there's probably a space for a potentially video from both of us, or just at least a explanation of why we think what classes are where they're at. Just in a solo hard carry, you're just going through your life. You're just throwing up random LFM stuff like that. You want to be the most consistent person in your party. That comparatively to if you have someone that you can consistently rely on.
Yeah, definitely. Having a second person makes lives feel a lot better. Like they just feel more consistent, easier to run and stuff like that, and it just makes them feel more fun. It doesn't feel as much of a drag. Like we usually do our lives like a single day, and it like if I was alone, I would not be enjoying it.
It,
I'd be like, "Ugh, this is fucking awful." But like just knowing I have another person there to keep you going, like whatever you're kind of like being like, "I don't want to fucking do this," or whatever, because that happens sometimes. It
yeah,
helps.
a break can turn into okay, I'll just stop for today instead of okay,
Exactly.
take a little break, get refreshed, come back, go, and then the other person does the same thing, and you're both ready and going.
Because there's some quests that I'm just like, I don't want to fucking do this quest, and I'll just I'll take a second.
Poor spies. Oh, those that
Hey,
lightning flame spies.
I have never taken a break in Spies. You've taken a break twice in Spies.
True. I think true that. True
I've
that.
died like every time in Spies, but hey, minor details. This is what the
Spies is
bakery's for.
rough. That's what the big. Yeah, that'll be interesting with
Not using any bakery. The
yeah the
bakery's closed for the day.
general goals of the speed run. The 6 hour speed run is no like outside consumables that you pick up through the store through stuff like that. It's
Cookies are an exception because we got all that in game.
yeah, if it's available in game, then you can do it, and sort of you can get DDO points and spend that. Uh, there's some things that are like work, like we use bunny hats, which give you MD when you have a scroll or wand. That's one thing, but spamming through a bazillion cakes is another thing. That's a lot. Just every time you die, like
Every time you die, fucking slamming your
just have it
cake button.
bound, just have K for cake.
I'm gonna get a Visa card slider on my keyboard if I run out, just in case.
Yeah, just swipe it, just whoop.
Ching!
Okay, there we go. Cakes, a little the Amazon auto order.
We can go ahead and segue into finishing the talks about the tier list. The things that we're having move around are points of contention for. So you actually played it in our most recent life on
Ooh,
our little 1
ooh.
to 20 where we were testing. It wasn't the fastest. It was like 11 hours, something like that. But we did a lot of good testing and stuff like that. But you were testing out the monk. How did you feel about the monk? Did you?
Yo,
Obviously,
monk
I know how you feel about it. But
monk goes zoom. It's insane. So monk just automatically base levels. You get percentage movement speed, sort of like barb. Level 1 of barb, you get 10% movement speed flat. Monk that scales up to 30%. And then so you're just zooming super fast. You can get a spring attack, sorry, super early as well by 6, and then you have a wings that's early, and that also goes through mobs, which is a little thing, but going through mobs is actually really nice. And something
it
like
can matter a
abundance,
lot in like
yeah,
doorways. If a mob's group up in a doorway, you just dash through it, and it can save you. It can save you from getting surrounded, which can cause a lot of deaths, which will matter when we're not using kicks.
100%, and especially for melees where you have to be get harried and then surrounded, then you're having a really rough time, if you don't have a hood or something.
Yeah.
And so the
Luckily, this
monk,
build does have the one you were playing does have strike through, but if you're playing like a fist monk before whirlwind, it'd be a struggle.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely some more testing to be done with monk. I'll be doing that soon. But overall, monk got super underrated on the tier list. Just realizing how powerful wings is, and any build with wings that gets it by level 12 is so good. Um, the like the favored souls may move up, they get it at 17. It's super late, but it helps just a little bit. May edge them over their competitors. But monk, you get it at 12, same as sork, and the early levels. Sork isn't as powerful. Scorch is good, but you run into a little bit of mana issues, stuff like that. Monk, you sort of just keep going. You're pretty survivable being in robes, 28% dodge, and a ton of like combine that with hood, and suddenly you're looking at like almost 70+% dodge, and
It-
that's doable.
It's also worth noting it's the fact that the monk basically has unlimited wings, right? Like at 12, I had wings, and you were still miles ahead of me. Like,
Yeah, just the
like,
key generation on a couple swings with or with fire stance, and
mhm.
some crits, some big crit profile weapons, and it was unstoppable.
And it's worth noting that we're specifically talking about the staff monk at the moment. I assume you'll be testing the hand wrap ones soon. But while we're
Yeah,
on it, then where would you personally move the staff up monk up into the tier list if you had to change his position?
that's a good call. Let me bring up the tier list right fast and sort of see where things are.
Because I think it moved up dramatically. I tried out the fist monk recently, and I only like fist monk felt pretty bad. Like I was fast, but I could not kill anything.
So monks, where are the monks currently? We got a couple, right? Just two-handed and fist, and we put
We have staff on there. We put staff below fist at first, which is definitely
yeah,
wrong.
yeah. We have two weapon fighting as well. Two weapon fighting monk.
Probably,
I,
yeah.
it's probably the worst out of all of them because fist you can. So
Or
fist
double
is
whirlwind.
moving up, right? Yeah, the whirlwind is nuts. Whirlwind hits multiple times, and there's some items that you can combo with that to try to clear rooms, stuff like that. Generate a ton of key, and not have to worry about anything. Staff monk isn't
Mhm.
too far behind. The strike through makes it so good though.
Wait,
Both
yeah,
get
I
spring
think
attack early,
I definitely think the staff monk moves above the fist monk though.
based off of your playthrough of the
Oh
fist.
yeah, definitely. I think the staff is dramatically better
Fists
for
don't have
her
as much
point
support,
duo.
but I'll have to see what my thoughts when I get
Yeah,
through that. Um,
definitely.
Staff monk, I think they have to move into. I mean, in a duo situation like A plus S,
Yeah, I
there's
agree. They're so fast.
I'd put them in probably A plus because Sork. I mean, in a duos, they're just so nuts because you're the only thing that you can pair with is Sork though. That's the only thing that keeps up because Barb or any other build that has a nice stopping power to be able to punch through things that the monk may just get overwhelmed with,
Does not have
it
wings.
just doesn't keep up, and so you're just gonna end up slowing down. You'd rather have another Sork at that point. Um,
I
and
agree.
so you have to pair it with it, but it's right up there at the top,
You
without
think
a
there's a
doubt.
world we try double monk?
We may try it. There were definitely a few spots where you being a Sork like saved me, especially early levels where I'd
Yeah,
get
just
overwhelmed and you
throwing a
just throw a scorch
fireball.
and yeah, be
You're just like,
over.
oh, the mobs are gone.
Yeah, like that there are a few spots where it gets really dicey as monk. Before you get wings. Once you get wings, all mobs are ours, just key generation and smack a few times, hit jump and wings over them.
Hmm.
You don't your base movement speed allows you to get out of most red DA harries, and I got double harried very little. That was something that you were even struggling
Yeah,
with.
I was struggling a lot with double harries at life, partially because things would just fucking be pissed at me and they wouldn't be grouped up, so it made me struggle a bit more. But
Yeah, the not being grouped up, like for sorks and for casters in general, being able to be in front and group things up to your liking is really big. Monk just sort of throws a fucking monkey wrench into there, and
yeah, it's maybe play a lot different, and I died a lot because of it. But
mhm.
the bakery was open that day.
Yeah, definitely some learning there. And while so monk's definitely moving up. I think that 2 weapon may be underrated. I'm not totally sure. It just doesn't have a ton of strike through, which means you sort of have to force cleaves, I think. I have to
Yeah,
figure out what 2 weapon fighting monk is looking like.
yeah, I don't know. It struggles so much with single target. It's like single target damage just really hurts you in the end, right? Like it's so hard to have like with the EK build, for example, right? When I was just meleeing, it felt so bad, man. Like because I would like have to kill a mob, walk to the next one, kill it, walk to the next one. It felt so bad.
Yeah, that's something where in a duo situation, if you have someone that can clear things, okay, that could work. Because then you can go like Vistani, 2 weapon fighting monk, and I think Ninja Spy supports that and stuff like that. Some like weird things that you if you get enabled, then you can be really powerful. It'll be difficult to beat staff, and I think even fists where you're just able to plow through mobs. With
Definitely,
that though,
definitely.
the tier list is going to be changing because of this new patch.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Single weapon fighting builds across the board are getting a pretty big buff. I think in particular, Bard is going to start to show up a bit more. Single weapon fighting Swashy Bard, because you get a
Yeah,
little bit of AOE. It comes on it comes online later, but
at
your
the at the boy sins there.
yeah, that's ends. Who is the Swashy Bard? He's a big fan. Even
Extraordinaire.
yeah, Swashi Board gets a little bit of AoE later, comes online a little later. Now it's just that coming online is going to happen a bit sooner, and that's going to be able to bump it a fair amount.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely gonna move it up. Like, I don't. I think it'll move it up, but it problem with the single weapon fighting builds in leveling is it will struggle with the same stuff that a lot of the other builds in the same area struggle with. Right? It's still going to be a single target build, so heroic leveling is still just like being a single target build just hurts your speed so much because you can't deal with red DA. You have to deal with the quest in a normal-ish manner.
Yeah.
Like I think it moves it up because it gains more damage, right? I think it moves it will move it above the 2 weapon fighting builds in most situations, definitely.
2 weapon fighting, yeah, especially because 2 weapon fighting is getting their chopping addressed to an extent, and so it's just not as going to be as common.
Yeah, it definitely is going to reduce the damage of all builds like that and just make it. I mean, like that matters more for the end game, but it's still like the less damage you do,
The
slower you
slower
are
you
in
go.
heroics.
Yeah.
But then more along that stuff that's going to be changing. Talk about a couple points of contention. Something that I had a lot of people mention, like this is the most mentioned thing, was the fact that Knight of the Chalice Paladin was below Death Cleric.
And
Uh,
it's so interesting because it's just one like Death Cleric, like they're both an A minus, right? They're both really good, but it's just one placement. I think it should just be one placement up. It's not even like, oh yeah, it should be better than other stuff or should be worse than other, like no, it's just one placement, which is it's interesting to me.
yeah, like I had like at least 4 or 5 people be like, "No, that's you know that shouldn't happen." And like I don't know, it's interesting to go look at. Like it's you've tested Death Cleric, but we haven't tested Knight of the Chalice Paladin, right?
Not
In a
not
manner
on
like
my
that.
not on my
Not on your
main.
main. You've
I
done it on
have
a lower life character.
yeah, I've done it on a lower life character, and I was still hard carrying through stuff, and it was still good. Melee still runs into that same issue that cleric just. I'm on Death Cleric above Kotick. Pally, personally. Where do you stand? What are your thoughts on this?
I haven't played either, right? Like I don't know. I don't know when I'll be playing either of them, but like from what I've heard, I feel like Kotick could move up because I've heard it has, quite a lot of room clears and stuff like that, which does help, but so does the Death Cleric. So I personally I'm going to abstain from that and just say it's because I haven't played
Ooh,
either.
abstaining. No opinions here.
I don't know, like it's whenever you were on the Death Cleric though, you were absolutely hard carrying me on the EK because I was trying to melee and it was you did all the work in the quest.
It was a little rough, especially early on. That's
Oh
where Death
man,
Cleric was
I
like
wanted to die.
it got a spotlight. You stood back, you were there, you're present. The spotlight was definitely on the Death Cleric. Um
Definitely, definitely.
there was
But
something I was just thinking.
and something
Yeah.
else really important to mention for the tier list. Where would you put Staff Rogue for our good friend Knife Palm?
Staff Rogue. Alrighty, so Staff Rogue, you get a pseudo wings. I think with my staff monk experience, the staff rogue doesn't have sustainability, so it's in a little bit of a rough spot. I don't even know if I could put it in B minus. It gets 1 wings, which is nice. That might bump it to B minus just for speed alone.
Okay.
It's squishy. It
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I just had to mention it for Palmy.
Yeah, I think the top of like Barbarian, right? Like that even has AOE
Yeah,
and more
got strike.
sustain. Yeah, and then I think it'll go below Bartopacy, below Barbarian, above Artificer as it stands.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh yeah, as it stands.
because much like we were talking about stuff shaken up in this upcoming patch, which should be presumed to go live in about a week from now.
Oof.
All casters except for Alks and Sorks are getting a buff, except for fire, except
Bye,
for Alks period
Alchemist.
and sorcerers. Let's talk about the other stuff and how it pertains to the tier list and sort of go ease into what's next.
Yeah,
So
we'll get to that. We'll get to that soon.
yeah, so divine casters, clerics, and favored souls across the board, every single spell is getting updated. The inflict wounds are doing very good damage. The level 4 alignment locked spells, again, really, really big damage. These are the increments of doubling their damage almost, and that could be really, really big.
Yeah, having like definitely favored souls will probably move up a little bit. The thing, like I've said on a few occasions though, is one shotting. If you're one shotting, you're one shotting, right? If even if you're one shotting for like hitting things for 1,000,000 damage, it doesn't matter compared to just hitting them the same health. So if you're over buffing something in heroics, it's not gonna make it that much faster, right? The problem is that they just don't like have all the other tools that Sork still has. I think it'll make it better, but I'm not sure if like favorite soul will be number one or like go up that much. You know what I mean?
Right, right. It's already in a pretty respectable spot in your midway
I agree.
through
Oh,
B,
yeah, it's definitely a good class for heroics.
and yeah, like is good, and it's just AOE is going to get cranked. It's going to get a little bit more support through all of it. If someone wants to try a build at endgame, they're going to have a really smooth time leveling through.
Like to
The
make a petition to give favorite soul wings level 12 so they can be number one. SSG, if you're
that
listening,
that would
please,
be amazing. That would shake up
please,
speed
please.
running so much. I feel wings at 12 for favorite souls. I sign on.
It's all I'm asking. Let me
Uh,
have it.
with that, we were just talking about Artificer and sort of the rogue fitting above Artie, but after the buffs, Artie again is getting the same sort of treatment of almost all of its damage being doubled, a little bit more support and interaction with some of their skills. And Artie's probably going to go up. I don't know how much. I have caster Artie not played a ton. I want to do a life of it or so to give it a good go. I enjoy casters in general, and so seeing that and the buffs, they look
You
juicy
be
for
honest. You just
Arties.
want to be on the other side of Tactit.
True. Yes. No more best laid plans. Me just being sad when I use my Harper pen and have nothing for 5 minutes, 3 minutes. It's just sad. I just want to tack at everybody. Make them all sit down.
True, 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 true. Red Druid. I think the Druid buffs are probably the most like maybe not necessarily for speedrunning of the tier list, but definitely they're definitely notable.
Yeah, and druids and artificers both. They suffer from the same sort of issue. Well, artificers ones. Like, wrapping up Artie. Artie's spell selection is pretty light. Same thing with Bard. Bard's also getting a big buff, and their spell selection is a little meh. Bard doesn't have a ton of single target. Artificer does, but their AOE's are a little bit lackluster, and then suddenly just run out of spells. They don't have enough They don't have enough things to fill their globals. And then their mana runs in. All these different things. But Druid is the most like pure caster of them all, with your elemental
Ye-
forms, your body and or your fire, sun and
Firewall
body.
moving on yourself,
Yeah,
body and sun or something like that.
yeah, and so that Druid can become really big. Their single target's already nuke, and so they're just gonna confirm that, sort of like saying it's overkill damage doesn't really matter. But their buffs to their AOE, their acorn, effectively their meteor swarm, is going to be pretty big. You're gonna be able to pull really big. And pure druids have the benefit of getting little bits of movement here or there, whether they go into wolf form, just idling before they switch back into their other elemental forms. Later on, you do get light wings They're not super impactful, but they are there, sort of like favorite souls. You're just gonna have a little bit more offensive support early. I feel.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I definitely think it'll swap it up a bit. I think Druid's gonna be really cool, and I'm looking forward to trying that out myself. Like that's one of the changes I'm more looking forward to trying out is the Druid stuff. So I'm definitely curious to see how it'll shake it up because I haven't played a Druid caster in so fucking long.
Yeah, since I got comp, that's what I got my Druid life on. That was almost 2 years ago.
Wow,
So
yeah, it's crazy to think about the timeline of this game, man.
yeah, yeah. You in the video you sort of championed called Bard
I
Spellsinger the
I
Dark
think it's
Knight,
good. I
and
think it's good.
so and it's even above Druid. And so, do you think that the Druid buffs are gonna make it
I
overtake Bard? Where do you think Bard's gonna land?
I think the Druid buffs are better than the Bard buffs. Like, so I think that it probably will. I want to see like a lot of my issues with reading the Druid buffs is I don't necessarily know what all the spells do that they're buffing. So
You're
I'm just kind of looking at the numbers and I'm like, wow, these numbers are big, and I think that's an important spell. So like I don't want to say it's a guess, but it's like an educated guess. I think the Druid buffs will be the biggest caster buffs. Not talking about the other melee buffs and stuff like that.
yeah, of caster things going on.
But we'll talk more about the patch notes and stuff, you know, later in the video. I know a lot of people have been asking about when we're going to actually do a full-on run of the 6-hour TR, right? And I think it's just good to say, we plan on getting racial comp. Like we mentioned it earlier, but we plan on getting racial comp before going for it and stuff like that. And we have some other goals though to like keep people, entertained on it for speedrunning and stuff like that. Like we have two other, things we're thinking about trying to try. Like we want to see how fast you can go 1 to 20, like which is like a 30 pot, no greater Toma learning on first life characters, right? Full, not necessarily full tilt on that. That'd be another interesting thing, but we don't want to burn 50 pots and stuff like that right now. But
It,
just because
chunk of
right
investment for
now
that one.
it's more important than, no, I wouldn't say more important, I guess, but it's due to a recent change. It's better to have alts for rating.
Yeah. And so having alts, having people go from low levels to high levels in a very short amount of time. Sometimes leveling alts can be a little monotonous, but showing that okay, if depending on what you want to do, you can go fast. You can do that, and so you can prep up a bunch of alts and playing with different combinations of builds, playing with different things that are currently very strong for an environment where you are bringing an alt to a raid.
Yeah,
It'd be
definitely, definitely.
good to see what those boundaries look like and provide pave the path a little bit for uh, anybody who is interested
Hmm.
in getting more levels on or more characters to a max level.
And the other thing, like other couple points I wanted to mention on speedrunning before we just went and talked about all the rest of the patch changes, were wanted talking about what it would speedrunning would look like if we had a full group of people like us running, right? Like because obviously there's diminishing returns when doing stuff like that, but like the more people you get, obviously the easier it gets. If you have 6 people, death becomes a non-factor in my opinion, because even though you can split and having more people that split different ways will still make things faster, it just things will die instantly and you're almost at no chance of dying,
Yeah,
which
especially
speeds up that.
if everyone's trying to be on and go really fast, then
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. It'd be interesting to see. Like I'm trying to think of some like specific quests where like 6 people, like Prisoner of the Plains, would be so much faster with 6 people.
it would pick up. I don't think it'd be super fast because it's still limited by the orbs, right? And just how
Definitely,
many you can
definitely. But
get. But
it's
stuff
just
like that it opens up where in a duos run, you're like fighting against being only 2 people, where the moment you've got a third person, suddenly like Chamber of Ryum opens up and just becomes that much faster, that much more efficient. Like I said, Prisoner of the Plains, you just get big chunks of efficiency. Madstone Crater, where everyone can go to their
yeah,
respective
like that's a
pillars.
good example of even with the 3 people. Is Madstone becomes like way more of an efficient quest and like definitely helps your time. And it just opens up the avenue for maybe different quests and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that seeing what's all possible and having those one-off uh, sort of events or focuses as runs where it's like, oh yeah, what is possible and pushing that boundary. It's fun. It's good to see what that looks like at the highest level. It's sort of like end game raiding and pushing R10s and doing, especially when you combine the two and do R10 raids. You really have to wean out. Okay, this is what our strat is, and you can't bring these builds; are just not good enough. You have to bring in these specific builds.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
definitely. Well, while we're also like finishing up on the grounds of what's possible, uh, what do you think like with let's say a full tilt 6-man group? What do you think could be possible, like the fastest possible run on like a buddy bonus weekend when you're going full tilt and
Fast
using
as
everything?
possible.
Like, what do you think is the like what's possible to do in a 1 to 20 life?
I, hmm,
I think it's a hard question,
it is a
but
difficult question. I'm
it's a
seeing.
really interesting thing to think about, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how, like, if we think that you can get 1 to 20 in 6 hours, right? Adding
With
another
2 people.
person, yeah, with 2 people, 1 to 26 hours, 2 people. Adding another person is going to drop that by a bit, but not a ton, and sort of going to keep going down that. So it's probably 5 hours minimum. Like you're hitting 5 hours with 6 people,
Hmm.
and then it's probably pushing into like the 4.5 range. It gets really small, the bonuses, because that's already making it
Buddy
like,
bonuses give you so much XP.
yeah, it's like 15 to 20% faster just with having those 4 other people. But buddy bonus as well. Buddy bonus gives a ton of experience as well. With that, yeah, you're probably looking at more like the low 4 hour range.
You
Would
would
be
just be
my
hitting.
guess.
You just be doing all the heavy hitters like Fire Caves, Shadow Crypt, like Vaughn 3. You're just doing like the big heavy hitter quests because you're getting so much experience.
Yeah. And that cuts out a ton of, there's like, oh, this is the least effective quest at this level. Get it out of there. Like the bottom 3 of the effective quests are just gone right off the bat.
Hmm.
And then if you push into the quests that are really good, again, Framework, Shadow Crypt, and Fire Caves,
Framework. Oof.
Framework's great. You
37
trust her.
seconds.
Yeah, the 112 right there.
That was the 112. But I believe that was probably a good spot to wrap up the speedrun topic of the podcast, and we can move more on to talking about the patch notes and what's coming for the future. Um, where do you
Yeah,
want to start with that? Do you want to start with Rip Alk or?
yeah. Let's go right into it. So we talked about when looking at the buffs and what's coming, especially the casters, because the casters are so influential on the speed run list. We didn't touch on Alk or Sork. Made a special note on that. Alchemist and Sorcerer, as it stands right now, are getting a pretty substantial nerf. 10 max caster levels to their main spells, Multivile and uh, Meteor Swarm. Their Alchemist is getting cooldown increased. It's getting Meteor Swarm's getting cooldown increased as well. Uh, Alchemist mana up. They're getting a bunch of their enhancement spell power gone. That's a
Alk
like,
is getting gutted.
yeah, Alk is hit pretty hard. It's struggling in comparison to now, where you can self CC and drop a multivile or two. The pack is pretty much guaranteed dead. Now it's you self CC, which their CCs didn't get touched. It's nice. You self CC, you throw both your multiviles, you do an entire rotation, and there's still chances of mobs being alive. And it just feels really rough to play, especially going from a fully committed 5 to 6 pieces of LGS, the PN goggles, full filigree, full raid filigrees, of all of that, to
Hmm.
where it is now is just such a big hit, and it feels pretty bad committing a ton of energy and focus into something to have it be gutted so ridiculously hard and just like, oh, it's good, and suddenly it's bad.
To a point where it's virtually unplayable. Like
In
a lot
in
of
the
people are
in the
trying to make the argument you can
highest.
still CC on it, and it's like, well, why wouldn't I just bring a DC Sork for
Yeah,
that?
and it's very important to go in the highest level of content in R10s, in raid pushing, stuff like that. It's going from a viable and at the very top of the list. It's not like Alex shouldn't get nerfed. They're at the very top and by a wide margin, but it's going from the very top to barely even. You're going to bring them to there to be efficient.
Yeah, like nukers are just getting hit really hard, except for like there's like a few of them that are decent right now that are getting a buff, like Ice Stork, for example. I know a lot of people are hating on it, but I think Ice Stork's gonna be sick after the changes. With like, I think Ice Stork's already good. I think the Iceberg buffs are just gonna make it better.
Cemented there.
I just want to get that in there. Ice Stork is good.
Yeah, and
Don't at me.
I sort of dropped out of popularity when they nerfed Wave from 20% exceptional crit chance to 5% crit damage. And so it dropped heavily. There wasn't as much Ice Orcs going on or happening. And now with the Feywild Augment setup, you're able to get your crit damage back up. You can't really that 20% damage or crit reduction is pretty big. But you're able to get your crit damage up even more than previously, and that sort of off changes it about, or changes the
Yeah, it's
numbers
definitely
to
interesting.
more heavily focus on those crits.
Definitely. I enjoy it and think it's good, but unfortunately, the Alk nerfs are just leaving nukers in a bad spot. Like Fire Sork was quite a bit of a ways off from Alk too. I actually don't really know why they hit Fire Sork with these nerfs. I think Fire Sork would have been the best nuker after the nerfs, but I don't think it would have. I don't think Fire Sork was OP at all. I don't understand why it was getting nerfed.
Yeah, it seems out of place. You want to go into a little bit on like what the Fire Sork and just DPS casters in general brought to like the end game environment, R10s and such.
I mean, for like R10s for example, it just brought like big burst damage to packs and stuff like that. Like a Fire Sork's never gonna kill a boss, man. That shit takes forever. Like looking it out, you can obliterate everything to the boss, and then once you hit the boss, you stop dead in your tracks.
You're slowed right down, and that's sort of the
And
balance
and
around casters in general.
and don't get me wrong, Alk was still too powerful. I'm not arguing that at all. But
Yeah,
it has just literally zero boss damage. And it's kind of the same with Fire Sork, except it was just less, right? You could just pretty much destroy the dungeon and stuff like that, but you stop dead in your tracks when you get to a boss.
yeah, and that's in comparison to say two-handed fighting builds where you're still able to clear through dungeons. You hit a dire charge on a big pack, you swing a handful of times, it's all dead with strike through, and then you get to the boss where you don't slow down very much. If you're running Fury and R10s, your adrenalines and overload melts bosses ridiculously high, and two-handed fighting did get a little toned down as well, but it in the meta of melees, it's really healthy. I really enjoy those changes. We can get into them in just a moment. But with casters, you don't have a lot of single target unless an outlier build like Ice Sork, which doesn't have a lot of AOE, and you're giving
Mhm.
that trade off in R10s is an end game, and that's where the DPS like burst casters thrived. So are raids. Raids are also an end game, and that's where the single targets thrive more. And like I said, like two-handed fighting builds, there's crossover between them, and so it's okay. I think at least it's okay to have certain classes and certain archetypes be better at different types of endgame because it's not the only type of endgame.
Definitely.
If you're gonna make a boss killer, then you're gonna make a boss killer perfect. You're gonna be terrible at running through R10 packs, but if you're gonna make an R10 farmer, then it's okay to have that and trade off your boss killing.
Yeah, that just kind of like I don't know. The Fire Sork nerfs felt really out of place. Like I don't think they were warranted. Like I guess maybe they're trying to pull all the casters together, and Fire Sork would have been the best nuker still, but I just don't think it was powerful enough to warrant these nerfs. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Yeah,
know.
in the context of like casters, like I said, in context of casters, they're bringing up pretty much every single other caster up, almost doubling its damage, and they're bringing Alchemist down by a ridiculous amount, almost cutting it in half, and then Firestork's down by a big chunk as well. But that leaves casters, while closer together, which is a good thing. I want to see more diversity in the endgame caster environment. Casters can't compete versus melee now. There's barely any reason to bring a caster with the big caveat of being a DC Sork who runs in with almost no
Yeah,
fail in every content, holds, insta
holds
kills.
instance just mops the floor with it.
Yeah, and those guys didn't get touched. And so it's very odd that they would polarize one specific build archetype and turn the rest completely away again from a super endgame environment.
Definitely.
Which this is DDO is an MMO. It is built around its endgame. That's what MMOs are there for. The leveling experience is nice. All these things are great, but you run lives, you get racials, you build power, so you can play an endgame.
An MMO without an end game is a dead MMO.
Yeah. And so seeing remove an entire archetype, we're definitely more on the bias side, enjoying Alchemist.
Because
We
we
both have
play
fully geared.
casters, yeah.
Yeah, we,
But
we enjoy it. You play DC Sork, so you sort of can get around it a bit. I never ventured in DC Sork. It's looking really appealing now, though. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, DC Sork is very fucking fun.
Yeah,
Builds
and
OP.
yeah, and so that's where Caster sort of got, but Mealy's also got a bit of love and not so much love as well.
Yeah, like two-handed fighting specifically, got that like what was it, 0.5% down on their ability score to damage now. Now they're
Yeah,
2.5
point.
instead of 3. I don't know the
Yeah,
exact change.
yeah, that's exactly it's on 5%. But yeah, it's a half an ability mod down instead of
Yeah,
taking your ability mod and multiplying by 3. It's now 2.5.
yeah. I think it's on. I think it's actually a fine change. I think two-handed fighting builds were performing very heavily, but funny enough, it doesn't hit the like best. Like it hits it when it's in its bear form, but it doesn't. It buffs the highest damage two-handed fighting build,
Yeah, so
which is
two
Wolf
and
right now.
yeah, the bear wolf, the druid, like 11 barb, 8 druid, 1 of cleric or favorite soul, and that build right there really focuses on being in wolf form, like bear form for idle clear. It does it fine. It's nothing stand out, but then in wolf you're able to pump out so much damage, and this two-handed fighting change again hits the bear side, the AoE cleave, stuff like that, but now cements that wolf as one of the best single target builds, period. And
Yeah,
that's
it
with a
absolutely
single weapon fighting
crushes.
buff of an extra what ability mod, half an ability mod.
Yes, and that's something to cover too. Though I think that single weapon fighting builds are going to do some obscene damage now.
Yeah, there's some pretty ridiculous things that are being enabled, especially with the new raid dropping and some new weapons dropping.
Yeah,
There's
like
lots of
Kopesh
focus.
and stuff like that. Good to
Yep.
see that come back.
Yeah, there was in between preview 1 and preview 2. There or from the pre-preview to 1 to 2, there were some raid items that were there. Now they weren't, and there was sort of teased, said, "Hey, here's some weapons that haven't been in the meta for a very long time, haven't been actually used," and then they're gone. Okay, where do they go? And they did come back for a showing in preview 2. We'll see exactly what drops in the raid, but all is there.
hmm But on the topic of single weapon fighting, was actually talking to Sins right before this, who's plays a lot of single weapon fighting, Swashbard, and the changes like uh made his kobold kill timer go like so much better. Like I don't know too much about it because I don't know a lot about the testing stuff in LOM and single weapon fighting builds, but from what he's told me, he said it's a very very powerful change for like Swashbard and stuff like that.
Yeah, across the board, single weapon fighting is getting brought up, which is great because they were widely considered one of the worst
Definitely.
build types. Right, you had Vistani two weapon fighting. There were sprinklings of little bits of two weapon fighting, other things that weren't using daggers. They were not very common though. And then you had two handed fighting, and single weapon fighting was sort of left out in the dust. And so now two-handed fighting got brought down a little bit. Two-weapon fighting got buffed up. They do different things, which is very notable. Where casters is again very confusing. They did very well in the or the melee changes. Two-handed fighting still does AOE cleave. Their single target damage a little bit less. Single weapon fighting again, single weapon fighting, single target does amazing damage, which is what it's supposed to do. You put it in an AOE environment, and it's going to struggle. Two weapon fighting,
Definitely.
swinging around with your Vistani, stuff like that. They got a bit of the short end of the stick. Their job is effectively the same as a single weapon fighting build. And so now there's really big competition between the two. Why you pick one over the other. It's in
Yeah,
a bit of a
definitely.
wonky spot. But overall, they're very, very close to each other. Little bits of tuning can have melees be in a very, very healthy state for the game.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to see like what direction melees and stuff will be going and stuff like that. Unfortunately, with the something else that we were gonna talk about was maybe the prospect of Vanguard coming back, but I think because the Bastard Sword's gone again, I think it actually like it hurts the prospect of that idea
There,
a bit
yes,
more.
one of the weapons that showed up for preview 1, but then it wasn't in there for preview 2 of these patch notes and the raid items is the Bastard Sword, which did more damage than the current endgame Bastard Sword, which was the too hot to handle sword. Um, you'd use the Dwarven Axe over the Bastard Sword almost every single time for current, and so Vanguard is already not being used. It's getting a bit of love in T5 of their Vanguard tree for Paladin and Fighter. Will it be enough? Not totally sure. It's there. It sort of does a little bit of the hybrid of a little bit more tanky than two-handed fighting builds, and pump out a chunk of single target damage, as well as AoE damage. It notably did not get hit by the 0.5 reduction in ability score mod multiplier like other two-handed fighting builds. They went from 3.0 to 2.5. Hand and a half weapons, bastard swords, and dwarven axes stayed at 1.6, and so that brought that gap again a little closer, which is really healthy for overall melee health.
Something to note along that too is I totally lost my train of thought actually. So there that goes.
That happens. It's gone. Whoosh. Might come back.
Oh yeah, I remember now.
Oh, here it is.
They may have made a lot of like the Vanguard changes with the T5 and stuff like that, but most of the Vanguard builds don't play T5 Vanguard at the moment, and it doesn't look like they still might. But I don't know. Maybe it changes it, and makes it to where these builds will play T5 Vanguard, which could at least change them up.
Yeah, it closes that gap between right now. One of the more powerful Vanguard builds is just pure Paladin, Dwarf, using Knight of the Chalice T5 and Tier 4 Vanguard for the bonuses to shields. Now that will be a little bit more of a contest. T5 Vanguard got a little bit more shield bashing, some more damage, and a really nice 19 through 20 extra multi, which applies to everything, your weapon and your shield. And so with stuff like Dwarven Axes, with a really high multiplier, and your shield just getting another multiplier on top of that on 18 and 20s, that really helps that damage sort of show up, and may edge it out in certain spots where the Codic tree was providing a little bit more AoE in their tier 5 as opposed to the single target. We'll have to see. It's definitely, Vanguard is not very well explored in endgame as it currently stands.
I'd really like to see like a new good shield be added for Vanguard too. Like right now, it's still just the Ravenloft shield's the best. It'd be really interesting to see like a raid shield that's designed like the best defense be added to the game, and see what Vanguard could do with something like that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty ridiculous. Best defense came from Ravenloft, which is almost 3 years old now, if not 3 years old. I'm not totally, I forget the timeline on it exactly. It just has a huge critical range, critical multiplier, really big base damage rating. It's one of the highest base damage ratings in the entire game, full buffed up. But it's on a shield, so it only procs the shield bashes and your offhand bash attempts or procs. And so seeing that become more upgraded, it's one of the reasons like bows and these builds that aren't as common, that like the new raid Kopesh is an example. Kopeshes aren't used too much, so something to update them, bring them into current meta is pretty big.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see.
Where if you're using old stuff like bows and even staff builds at endgame, they just don't have the support where melees and weapon-based builds need to build around a weapon. Who would have thunk?
Like the support of the raid items is what will determine the meta at the end of the day. Like if you don't, like it's part of the reason bow builds are considered partially bad, like you said, is there just wasn't a raid bow, right?
Yeah,
like maybe they'll be better now that we're getting a raid bow coming into the scenario.
Yeah, and there is slated bow changes for later in this year, later in 2021. And with that, hopefully there will be some good support for the time being. You get a bow builds get a bone thread to them, because they don't have to use the chaos bow from Killing Time now, which is ridiculously old and just doesn't hold up. Now there's actually something there to focus on. Same thing for Monk Shuri builds. Right now,
Yes.
Thrower and his ranged in general is dominated by throwing knives, because of so much support through the Vistani tree and simple throwing expertise, stuff like that. Now you have a shuriken that is at endgame, and you can, and the last shurikens I believe were again in Baba, for endgame.
Baba.
Yeah, spite. And so now that's just going to get a bonus to that, and especially with again monk changes coming up sooner than later, one of the next big content drops, there may be some really nice shakeups, and at least just another represented archetype or class style for that specific role.
Yeah, I'm personally looking forward, really forward to try Shuri Thrower. I like Knife Thrower quite a bit when I played it, and Shuri Thrower just sounds really fun. Getting to play maybe a pure monk and stuff like that, and get all those fun monk benefits that just unfortunately haven't had the power to be able to play the end game onto a powerful build. Just sounds like really fun.
And it may finally open up a thrower build that levels through heroics at an okay pace, because like monk already right now is getting looked at to move up this list that we have and these things that we focus on. maybe a throwing shuriken monk will start to really show up in heroics.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's interesting to see, and I hope that the Shuri really changes it up. And even if it doesn't make it top tier, it makes it viable to play. Like I would love to play. I'd love to play a Shuri build. It sounds so fun.
Yeah, and the idea behind just like balance in general, I guess, is trying to keep things playable and fun and there, something that doesn't feel terrible to play. But metas come and go, patches buff and nerf things, and that's a part of the game. Like playing to those strengths for this for the top end of players is important and keeping things lively and making it not so it's just one build that is being played, right? Nerfs to Alk, good. I think that nerfing Alk is fantastic, but they did it so much along with all the other casters that are played and cemented and actually done without bringing anything to fill that gap. It leaves them dead, and now they're on life support and they need something else there as a big bonus. Two melees got a really good pass. Again, I praise SSG, which doesn't have very often, for their pass on melees. It is looking to be really, really solid.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that statement. Like I'm not gonna praise them on the alc changes because I still very much dislike them. But I think what they've done with melees this patch looks very good.
Just overall changes will
Like
be. I think they're in a positive direction overall, and I think that it sets them up to do things that are good. At this point, talking about a game that's been around for 16 years, talking about potential is a little bit of a rough spot, at least in my opinion, where
mhm.
have been around, you know what patches look like, you have the modern day of balancing and understanding and seeing what other companies and game developers are doing. Really try to focus on executing on things every single patch and making sweeping
Definitely.
good changes. A big thing of that, a company to really focus on that is GGG, Grinding Gear Games, based out of New Zealand, who does Path of Exile. And they, every single patch, bring new content. They bring good changes. They bring just this host of things. It takes people hours to go through all the lists of balance changes and all the tweaks that they're doing, little buffs here, little nerfs here. And they've gotten themselves in a really good spot and really good standing with their community. And their game is exponentially growing every single time they put out new content because of it. And they're reaping the benefits. So it'd be really great to see that show up more for DDO, I think.
Definitely. Like definitely some of the things in the patch I was not happy with and maybe pretty upset when I first read them. But like I'll give credit where credit's due, right? Like the melee changes are good, and if we can see more things like that in the future, it would give me like you know more hope to see cool things in the meta actually shift in this game. Because like I'm a person that I like some people think it's lame, but I will just play what's meta. I don't know. It's what I enjoy doing. I like being powerful and stuff like that. So when meta changes, it's fun for me because I get to play different things.
Yeah, and it's a very high end perspective from that, but it's when someone comes into like my stream or just asks, "Hey, what should I play?" The first answer is, "What do you find fun?" And that's what you should play because the game is all about what you enjoy. And so if that's from just trying out random builds and builds getting buffed, all the other caster nerfs really great for people that just want to try these builds, try divine caster clerics or uh different druid caster things.
Oh, something on those lines that we kind of forgot to mention because it wasn't in the first part of the changes and we didn't talk too much about is the warlock changes.
Yeah,
I,
warlocks are
I
getting a
kind of
bunch of
forgot.
extra dice.
I kind of forgot about that coming up. I don't think it'll push them into great relevancy states at this point, but it might do some good things for the class that really needed. The warlock is struggling right now. Like its DC caster variant isn't awful. It's not as good compared to Sork, but maybe these changes and maybe some further changes will help propel it into a better state as a damage.
Yeah, and DC builds in general, like wizard, sork, even potentially druid, and like cleric, like a death cleric variant. They're all in their very different archetype. They're very very different. They focus on so many different things compared to the rest of their core class. Damage, you just sacrifice all your damage to instantly kill things and be very efficient with it. And that's warlock. That's what Morgan just said. Warlock already has that sort of variant there with their multiple fingers of death, stuff like that. But their damage side severely lacking. Warlocks, when they first came out, very overtuned, had a ton of damage, and then they got hit really hard and haven't received a lot of love since. So now they're getting a bunch of pack dies reintroduced, and that should help all of the variants sort of feel better to play as you scale up. Warlock's pretty solid leveling up, but then you just hit a wall where you just don't have enough support and scaling into a later point of the game. Hopefully, open up the things that to those things that people that do play Warlock really enjoy.
Definitely, like it's hard to live in a world where you can just play whatever class you want and be like good at the end game. But like that's like the perfect world, right? Like it would be awesome to be able to play whatever the fuck you want at end game and still have relevancy. But there's just some classes that aren't at that point.
Yeah, and that's okay. Those need to help. The things that are there and are really powerful, bring down a little bit, stuff like that. And that creates a meta. It makes everyone the more the closer you are to that world where everything is balanced, perfect balance is achieved, whether it's impossible or not, the more players that are going to enjoy what they're doing because they feel powerful and they want to share that with others, and that creates good talk, good hype, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know a lot of people that don't play meta, especially what they enjoy, but like being powerful is fun. Like if you get to play what you really like playing, and you also get to feel like really powerful, that's really really fun. Like being
Yeah.
able to just run over things is fun.
Yeah, and there's definitely like there's that. There's like having fun, being powerful, and there's also playing what you enjoy. It won't be as powerful. Some people like Morgie want to play the things that they enjoy, or just the things that are powerful because that's what they enjoy. Others may bite the bullet, be like, okay, this isn't as powerful. I'm still gonna play because I enjoy the archetype. It's important to intermix those though, and keep the people that do commit and really make their identity around a certain style or play style or class archetype, something like that, that they if they get nerfed down, that they come back up to relevancy, and there's a good intermixing. Because if something isn't being played like right now, or with what's looking to come up with the DC or with the offensive DPS casters, if none of them are good, that means anyone who wants to play DPS caster and do it and apply themselves to it and play to that end game focus isn't able to, and that feels really really terrible.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And so seeing things that aren't as drastic of nerfs, huge, heavy-handed, just thwacks, you're too good, get down, become bad, not a good look for anybody. But seeing little incremental drops down, make them more consistent, sneak things in to patch notes, be like, okay, this is just a nice little update. Oh, also we're tweaking damage by 10% here, or we're changing how this ability works. They're just these little things that can start to add up over time, and all of a sudden, like right now, Feywild's been out for close 4 or 5 months now, and Ice Sork has been as it has been standing for all that time, and now it's just starting to see a little bit more love and a little bit more focus.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's like a lot of undiscovered things with Feywild. Like I know there's a DC Sword build out there that people are gravitating towards rather than what the old one was, the LGS and stuff like that. And it's just like there is definitely room for undiscovered things.
Yeah, and even something that shook up the meta a ton last year was the 17-3 healer that just sort of came out of nowhere. I do not recall any specific balance change that happened that enabled 17-3 healer to become so powerful. And it's a really tanky, really survivable with high positive spell power healer. And now it's a staple. If you're bringing a healer, you might as well be 17-3.
Exactly. Yeah. Big time.
And so stuff will come and go. It's good. Stuff is yet to be discovered. It's all about testing those things out and bringing new highlights, whether directly or indirectly. Say, Caster Artificer right now is nuts, right? It's crazy, but no one plays it. It's just super undiscovered build. Add a buff to it, change some things around. Suddenly, people are going to give it a go, realize, oh, this is fantastic, and sort of surge that into popularity. It's happened in other games, League of Legends in particular. A champion got a skin, and because of that skin and that hype around it, people realized, oh wait, this champion's actually good, and you saw his win rate and his pick rate skyrocket after that, and subsequently need to be nerfed. So just how you apply different builds, how you apply different things, can be the thing that make or breaks and finds the next great build.
Definitely.
With that, is there anything else you want to touch on, Morgan, or focus on, bring up?
um, I don't think there's too much to touch on other than maybe give some insight on what we may talk about in the coming podcasts. Say that we're definitely want to try and make this a regular thing. Get some podcasts out. Hopefully once a week, something like that. But
It would be nice, not setting it too high. The last podcast I did was over a year ago at this point, at the end of Hardcore Season 1. I did that with Yavul, my father, and just our thoughts and opinions on those, with a little bit more of a cohesive, cooperated focus on content creation with Morgie, using the channel as a platform, as well as pushing everybody towards Morgie. Go find Morgie. All the spots. It'll be in the description down below.
oh, that's
Uh,
me. I
that's
don't stream
him.
very often.
We'll see if that
But when
changes.
I do,
uh, Hopefully getting a little bit more consistency of videos putting out, using the tier list as a guide of, okay, this is a build that we had there, we had at this ranking, this is what it actually looks like to play, and this is where does it stay, does it go up, does it go down, things like that. It creates a really good consistent timeline, and then just having a constant check-in every week, every other week, something like that for the podcasters, what our ideas are, what our thoughts are. There's so much going on, there's always something to talk about.
definitely like some of some of the things we mentioned wanted to talk about, or like hardcore again, for example, like what could change, what we think would make the game better, stuff like that. But that's obviously for next week and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
maybe
and
not for next week, but the coming weeks is
yeah,
things like that we want to talk about. Hardcore, a bunch of other things, maybe like compared DDO to other MMOs, things around those lines. If there's anything like you would like to see us talk about, feel free to put that in the comments, and maybe we'll talk about it next week.
yeah, we'll be able to see through everything. The community interaction is really nice on streams and through comments, and just hearing these things, it creates really good talking points and highlights things that, I mean, we play the game, we play it a lot and really enjoy it, but we don't have knowledge on everything. So, is Death Cleric better than Paladin, than Kotick Paladin? Is it not? Death Cleric not played too much, or people just get biased because they play Kotick more? These are great questions, and then highlighting those and creating a focus around them is a really important thing, I think.
And that specifically in heroics, Paladin is way fucking better than Death Cleric in Endgame.
True.
Before we get fucking flamed.
Yeah. There's definitely a big place for Kotick to end fighting.